In 2025, hybrids and plug-in hybrids are very common. That's just how it is nowadays. And it works. These SUVs and even trucks are getting great gas mileage, a 30% increase from 2 decades ago. In the early 2000s though, the idea of combining a gas engine with an electric motor was pretty bold. Honda was first to test the waters in America with the introduction of the Insight, and technically hybrids have been around since the early 1900s, but they never took off. Then the Prius came out a year later, and ever since, many have been successful over the years, and now they're everywhere. However, there were some interesting attempts from domestic automakers in the early to late 2000s with hybrid systems. Yes, first generation technology is rarely perfect, I get that, but it's important to understand how we got to where we are today. So in this week's video, I'm going to be going over some of the failed and forgotten hybrids from the 2000s, and by the end, you'll be left scratching your head wondering why anyone bought these things brand new. In terms of the timeline, we begin with GM's light hybrid system offered from 2004 to 2007 on first-gen Silverados and Sierras. At first, they were only available to commercial buyers. In 2005, a select few states in Canada, and by 2006, most of North America had them available. Oh, and only the extended cab short and standard bed configuration had them. They cannot be had with other body styles. Before I get into the system, I'll just briefly go over the cosmetic changes, which were hybrid badging and 16-inch cast aluminum wheels. Alrighty, so here's how it works. Instead of using a regular starter and alternator like a normal truck, this system uses a small electric motor that's placed between the engine and transmission. This motor helped with starting the engine, shutting it off at stops, and charging the battery while you drive. Basically, it's a start and stop feature that you could not turn off. I've driven a Grand Cherokee with auto start and stop. I feel like a lot of cars have this feature nowadays, and I would always turn it off because it's annoying. There was no button in those trucks to turn it off. Back in 2005, it was a $2,500 add-on, which translates to over $4,000 in today's money, and if you're lucky, you maybe got 1 mile per gallon better than regular 5.3 half tons. Now, these did have 4 120 volt 20 amp outlets, 2 in the cab, 2 in the bed, which is a nice touch for charging tools on the job site, when camping, whatever the case may be. Lastly, they could haul and tow the same as conventional 1500s, which again is a nice touch. These were the stepping stones for what we're about to get to later in the video, but I feel like most of us don't remember them at all, and $4,000 is a lot of money for what you got. In 2005, the first hybrid SUV produced by a US automaker was for sale. It was the Ford Escape and Mercury Mariner, and they were true hybrids unlike the Silverado and Sierra. These were actually a huge success. For their first year, they sold 4 times the amount that they thought they would. It won North American Car of the Year, and they got almost 50% better fuel economy than their 4-cylinder non-hybrid counterparts. I should mention that these did have Toyota hybrid technology in them, as per an agreement they made with Toyota receiving Ford diesel and direct injection technology. I wanted to include them to show that not all domestic automakers were failing at this new hybrid technology. And that brings me to the Saturn Vue Green Line. I'm sure many of us are familiar with Saturn's Red Line offerings. The Ion Red Line is one of my favorites. Well, there was also the Green Line. This was GM's second attempt at a hybrid system, but they were very similar to the Silverados and Sierras with that belt alternator starter, or BAS. In other words, they were mild hybrids with an auto start-stop feature with regenerative braking to recharge the battery pack, but these now had electric assist when accelerating from a stop. Many hybrids from the time, at the very least, had a fuel economy / power assist computer that presents a challenge for maximizing fuel economy. Think of it as a little game. Well, all these had was an eco light in the gauge cluster that would turn on when fuel economy is maximized. It didn't even have an average fuel economy section. I guess it's not the worst thing, since these aren't full-on hybrids anyway. They still had an automatic transmission, not a CVT, and that's a pro depending on who you ask. Conventional 4-cylinder Vues were rated at 22 miles per gallon city and 27 miles per gallon highway. These got 27 city and 32 highway, which is in fact a nice bump. Matter of fact, these had the highest fuel economy of any 2007 model SUV sold in the US market. However, they cost an additional $5,000 on top of base Vues back in 2007, or almost $8,000 in today's money, so it would take a while to break even. Here's the breakdown. Back in 2007, the national average for gas was around $2.80 or $4.44 in today's money. To break even on that almost $8,000 investment, you would need to drive at least 250,000 miles, which would take most people over a decade to do. The second gen View had the green line option, but only for a year, and by then the Saturn brand had lost its identity and was on their way out. The Aura had this green line trim as well, and overall, they weren't terrible. They were cheaper than a lot of the conventional hybrids, got good gas mileage, but not many people bought them or even knew about them. It's time we get to the meat and potatoes, the entire reason why I wanted to make this video, and that's the two-mode hybrid system that debuted in 2008. The economy was in the absolute toilet. It's the Great Recession, gas was more expensive than ever, SUV sales were dropping, panic was kicking in. GM, Chrysler, Daimler, and BMW would all work together and create a full-on hybrid system, and it was nothing short of a disaster. As I said, it debuted in 2008 and were available on the Tahoe, Yukon, Escalade, and later Silverado and Sierra, the good old GMT 900s. Cosmetically, I'm going to refer to the Tahoe as most sales were those, but a lot of the changes done to them were done to the others as well. The first element that probably caught your eyes is the giant hybrid decal that runs across both doors. It's got the letter H in green on the C-pillar, and there's one more on the back. But unlike from what we've seen so far, there was more work put into these than a few cosmetic badging. They got this front air dam thing or plastic lip, they were lowered about an inch, roof racks were removed, they had an aluminum hood, liftgate, and front bumper beam, unique wheels, and D-pillar moldings to help reduce drag. The coefficient of drag was in fact improved from 0.36 to 0.34, and they didn't weigh more than their conventional counterparts with its hybrid technology, which is actually very impressive. These were GM's first full hybrids, meaning that they could run purely on electric power and they had an electric variable transmission. That's how the two-mode hybrid system got its name. Two electric motors worked like a CVT at lower speeds and switched to 4 mechanical gears for higher speeds and towing. Sounds impressive, and it was a full-size SUV that was a hybrid in 2008. There was nothing else like it. But under the hood was GM's 6-liter Vortec V8. 6 liters, 364 cubic inch V8 hybrid. Regular Tahoes got 14 miles per gallon city and 20 miles per gallon highway. The hybrid Tahoe got 20 miles per gallon city and 20 miles per gallon highway. Combined, that's 16 and 20, which is a 25% increase. Yeah, on paper, that's good. It's great, but just like the green line, these were more expensive. We're talking anywhere from 10 to 15 grand more in today's money depending on the trim and if they had four-wheel drive or not. And yes, these could be optioned with four-wheel drive. Not sure who's off-roading in a hybrid Tahoe, especially with that front lip, but it was available. For 2012, GM sold 533 hybrid Tahoes, which is 0.8% of all Tahoes sold that year. If that wasn't bad, the trucks had a lowered towing and payload capacity compared to their non-hybrid counterparts by 1/3. That's not to mention that actual fuel economy often falls short of EPA estimates. Car and Driver observed 16 miles per gallon combined when the EPA rated them at 20. But wait, there's more, because Chrysler wanted to join in on the fun and offer the same two-mode hybrid system on their full-size SUVs. Specifically, Chrysler's first SUV ever, the Aspen, and the Dodge Durango. The two-mode hybrid system was available on the 5.7 Hemi, and they made 385 horsepower and 390 pound-feet of torque. With the electric motors alone, these full-size SUVs could be propelled 25 miles per hour, and the 5.7 featured cylinder deactivation technology. That being said, these got about 25% better fuel economy than their non-hybrid counterparts. The EPA estimated ratings were 19 city and 20 highway. Regular Hemi models got 13 city and 18 highway. For a modern comparison, a 2020 Durango with the 5.7 Hemi gets 14 miles per gallon city and 22 miles per gallon highway. Here's the issue though, the timing was just flat out horrible. They were launched right after fuel prices spiked, and if you were getting a brand new SUV, chances are you probably don't care about fuel economy. Because if you were after a hybrid, you wouldn't get an Aspen or a Durango, and sales reflected that. Combined, the Aspen and Durango hybrids sold fewer than 1,000 units. They costed around $4,000 more in 2009, which is more than $6,000 in today's money, and to get a return on the investment, you would need to drive again for at least over 200,000 miles. Both the Aspen and Durango only came in four-wheel drive. They were fully loaded, and they weighed an additional 400 pounds because of the hybrid technology. Another thing about the Durango and Aspen from this time, any Mopar product for that matter in the late 2000s, really bad interior quality, like really bad, and these two were close in being the most expensive Mopars at the time. To wrap everything up, bottom line, if you really wanted the efficiency of a hybrid from the late 2000s, you wouldn't buy these massive truck-based SUVs. It makes no sense. If you have the money to spend 65, 70 grand on a new car, then I don't think fuel economy is that much of an issue for you. And there you have it, a video on the failed/forgotten hybrids from the 2000s. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, and if you made it this far and aren't subscribed, why not click that button? I only upload once a week and won't be all over your homepage. With that said, enjoy the rest of your week, and I will try and see you all next week.